Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alex Paul from InvestorStream, and I'll be your host today. This morning, we have Island Pharmaceuticals Managing Director and CEO, Dr. David Foster, and Non-Executive Chairman, Jason Carroll, who will provide a company update on recent activities, including an overview of the key findings from the company's ongoing review of the galidesivir data package. Now, for those with questions, there is an FAQ page located on the announcement, and I would highly recommend investors give that a read. However, if you have any additional questions, please send them through via the Zoom platform, and Jason and David may be able to address them, timing permitting. A copy of the webinar will also be available on Island's social media platforms later today, but for now, I'd like to throw it over to David to kick things off for us. David, the floor is yours.
Very good, Alex. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here to hear this update from Island Pharmaceuticals. We're looking forward to telling you about galidesivir, the progress we've made, including very recent progress in view of the announcement that came out just a little bit ago. So to set the stage, Island Pharmaceuticals, I suspect many of you know, but I'll tell you anyway, Island Pharmaceuticals is an antiviral drug development company. We like to focus on small molecule antivirals targeting infectious diseases where there is significant unmet medical need. And we're in a very good situation because we have two well-advanced clinical stage programs, excellent molecules targeting viruses where there's significant unmet medical need. There's major market potential for both of these programs, ISLA 101 as well as galidesivir. Both of these assets have the opportunity to achieve a priority review voucher upon approval, which is exciting and really unparalleled for a company like Island Pharmaceuticals. We are working right now with galidesivir to get in front of the FDA, to ask the FDA some questions about our regulatory path, about the study that we need to conduct. We're making significant progress in our interactions with the FDA, including, again, some feedback we received from them today. Galidesivir is really based on the fact that it is a broad-acting antiviral. It has phenomenal activity against a number of viruses. Importantly, we have very exciting and potent data demonstrating that it has activity against very aggressive viruses in a variety of different animal models, and we'll talk about some of that today. Finally, we have multiple near-term catalysts that you'll see as we go through this presentation. Just to give you an update on the corporate snapshot, again, 253 million shares on issue. The share price is a little outdated, even though this is only taken from a few days ago. But we've had a very nice run recently. I'm grateful to our substantial shareholders, as with all of our shareholders, but Dr. Bill Garner, Jason Carroll, MWP Partners, Dr. Daniel Tillett, always grateful for these guys who are strong supporters of our company. I also want to point out the board, Jason Carroll, Chris Tumanopoulos, a fantastic board that, quite frankly, we roll up our sleeves and get in the trenches and we work hard every day. And it's a pleasure to work with them. I mentioned that we have two clinical stage assets, galidesivir and ISLA 101, again, both with the opportunity to receive a priority review voucher upon approval. Galidesivir is a small molecule, broad activity against very high number of viruses, significant high priority threats. There's a significant robust development history. Galidesivir was actually supported with about $70 million from the US government. They were very interested in its development as a bioterror countermeasure. So the government is keenly interested in this molecule. We believe that because we're going after significant bioterror threats, we may have the opportunity to pursue what's called the animal rule. I'll describe the animal rule in a little more detail, but it enables you to expedite your regulatory path, your clinical path, if you're focusing on specific viruses. And we believe that Marburg is an eligible virus. As a result, we believe that once we get close to approval, we can start talking with the US government about putting galidesivir into the strategic national stockpile, that this would, again, be a bioterror countermeasure. We would fill the stockpile with a government contract from the US government. ISLA 101, just as a reminder, ISLA 101 was the molecule we've been developing. It is our dengue program, fantastic molecule based on technology from Monash University. ISLA 101 is a repurposed molecule. It was initially developed by J&J several years ago, but it's never been approved for anything. It's formed the basis of numerous clinical trials, 40 plus clinical trials, literally thousands of people have taken ESLA 101, demonstrating an excellent and well-known safety profile. We recently completed a very successful phase 2 clinical trial demonstrating that ESLA 101 provided protection against dengue infection in a dengue challenge model. We're now in the process of talking with our key opinion leaders, designing the next clinical trial because we're excited to continue to develop ESLA 101. But today is all about galidesivir. I really want to focus on that. We've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years working on this molecule, concluding an acquisition just about 2 months ago, and we've been working incredibly hard since then to finalize the plan, to recognize the opportunity, which quite frankly, the opportunity continues to expand the more we dig into it. And now we're interacting with the FDA to get guidance on the next steps. So I've mentioned that it has activity against a wide variety of viruses. I'll show you that on the next slide. It has activity against potential bioterror threats. This would include Marburg. This would include Ebola. As a result, we think that there's many opportunities we can go for the commercial side of things. We believe there's a significant opportunity as a government stockpile program. We believe we could also expand, once we get approval in our first indication, expand to a variety of other viruses, including Nipah, including potentially measles, Zika, a variety of other viruses. This all makes us potentially ripe for partnering as well. So I mentioned the vast number of viruses where we've seen galidesivir have activity, and just to highlight a few of these. We see Marburg here in these filoviruses. We see Ebola here, which is a terrible, horrible virus. Nipah over here, a significant problem. And I want to point out measles. We have preclinical data demonstrating activity against measles, which if you're watching the news, measles is blowing up. It's blowing up here in the United States. We're seeing outbreaks now even in Australia. I would urge you to pay attention to this. We think there's an opportunity here for us as well. A number of other viruses. Again, galidesivir is going to be a potent antiviral molecule against a variety of different viruses. If we look where we have animal data, again, it's a robust data package. We have animal data in hamsters looking at yellow fever. We have animal data in non-human primates looking at Zika, against non-human primates looking at the Marburg virus, non-human primates looking at Ebola. BioCris did a tremendous amount of work, again, mostly with US government support, to look at all of these animal models and determine where they wanted to go with the molecule. In all of these animal models, the control animals, if they didn't die, they did very poorly. The vast majority of the control animals all died, and significant survival when all of these animals were on drug. So this is really the money slide, in my opinion, the slide that changed everything for us as we were looking at galidesivir. This is a survival curve. We're looking at non-human primates that are infected with the Marburg virus. And then what they did was they began dosing after infection at different time points, 1 hour after infection, 24 hours, and 48 hours after infection. So let's see what happens. Again, on the y-axis, you're looking at percent survival. On the x-axis, we're looking at time after infection. So if we look at the light blue circles, these are the control animals. You can see that by day 10, most of the animals are dead. You can see by day 12, all of the animals are dead. Now, if you dose these animals 1 hour after infection, this takes us to this line. 5 of the 6 animals survived. Only 1 animal died. And then the vital piece of information is what happens if you dose at 24 and 48 hours after infection. You see these 2 lines here, 100% survival. In the face of a Marburg infection that is 100% lethal, galidesivir prevents death, 100% survival. It's an astonishing result. Just so that you can remember this when you go home, this is a really important slide. Again, the placebo animals, 100% death, 0% survival. Animals dosed 1 hour after infection, 83% survival. 5 out of 6 of the animals survived. I'm not quite sure really why that one didn't survive. I think it's an aberration, but nonetheless, that's what the data are. And then it dosed at 24 and 48 hours after infection, 100% survival. Jason, I see you there.
Oh, yeah, sorry. You can't even imagine what it means to have a pharmaceutical company that has this sort of data. You can look for a very long time to find something that can be used in a virus that kills within 2 weeks and find you can actually have that survival number on average when it comes to these sort of studies, and certainly the ones that got approved by the FDA via the animal rule, 40% to 90% is kind of the range. So you can think about galidesivir as almost a super drug in that way, that it's managed to have survival benefits in Marburg, and as David will show, in Ebola at that 100% stage after you have an infection, which is pretty amazing. So I think this is very rare for a company to have this, and we're very lucky as a business to have it. Thanks, David.
Jason, thanks for that. Yeah. Let me move on to, again, I want to drill down a little bit on the Ebola data. This has been presented previously, but it was in the context of an initial summary of galidesivir, but I want to drill down a little bit because it's incredibly important. So in this experiment, again, this is a survival curve. We're looking at non-human primates infected with Ebola, then dosed with galidesivir following infection, okay? Let's look at the control animals. What do we see? By day 10, most of the animals are dead. By day 20, they're all dead. Now, if we dose them, and in this experiment, the way they did it, they dosed with a high concentration loading dose followed by a maintenance dose. And they started dosing initially at 48 hours. And that's what you see here, 48 hours post-infection with a loading dose followed by a maintenance dose, 100% survival. If you took away the loading dose and went straight to the maintenance dose, which just means you start with an average dose rather than a higher dose, you see the green line here. I'm sorry, you see the red line here. 4 of the 6 animals survive when you don't have the loading dose. So what this tells me is when you include a loading dose, it's really a concentration dependent, whoops, that was not the way to go, a concentration dependent increase in survival, which is very compelling. Let me go there. Then, if you were to start the loading dose at 72 hours post-infection, again, now you see the green line. So 4 of the 6 animals survived. And again, that's a remarkable result. 2/3 of the animals survived in the presence of drug, when in the absence of drug, 100% lethality. And again, just a summary slide, take-home slide, all the placebo animals died. When you had the loading dose at 48 hours, 100% of the animals survived. If you didn't have the loading dose, or if you waited until 72 hours to start that loading dose, 2/3 of the animals survived. So again, a phenomenal result. So what does that mean in the context of getting the drug approved? I think you're probably all aware, we're very interested in pursuing Marburg as our lead indication. And the reason for that is we believe, based on substantial diligence, on feedback from our regulatory advisors and attorneys, that Marburg is eligible for approval via what's called the animal rule. The animal rule says if you can't safely or ethically conduct a human efficacy study, then you can get approval based on an animal efficacy study if you also have phase 1 clinical data in humans. So you have safety data in humans. And imagine if you're trying to conduct a Marburg clinical trial. Marburg is incredibly difficult because it's so lethal. What happens is there's an outbreak, people get infected, everybody dies, and then it burns itself out. So you can't run a clinical trial. But what you can do is an animal study. And in order to get the animal rule approval, what you need to do is the second line. So in contrast to the top line, which is the traditional drug development path, which takes 15 years. It's a long process, but the animal rule really truncates that. And what it means is after you've done your preliminary preclinical work, when you get to animal studies, you need to do 2 animal efficacy studies in a well-validated model. And then you also need to have phase 1 safety data, and then you can submit your new drug application. You don't need phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials. To repeat, you do not need to conduct phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials. You can rely on efficacy from animal studies to get to approval. So with that in mind, where does galidesivir stack up along those lines? Again, all of the preclinical work has been done. I've just shown you 2 slides ago the Marburg experiment that would be the first of the validated animal studies in Marburg that we would need to conduct. I can also tell you that BioCryst conducted 2 phase 1 safety studies, so we already have a safety database. So we believe that we may be 1 animal efficacy study away from beginning to work on our new drug application. And once we do that, in contrast to the traditional new drug application review period, which takes about a year, we would expect this to get priority review. That means we get it in about 6 months. So we are looking at the potential of 1 additional animal study, work on animal efficacy study, begin work on our new drug application, and get that submitted. A phenomenal path. And we're working very hard to move this along as quickly as we can. Jason, I'm going to let you take this. I know you've given a lot of thought to what happens once we get approved and where do we go commercially with this. So after you.
Thanks, David. And just wanted to say that galidesivir isn't intended to be just another sort of antiviral. There's a lot of antivirals in the world. This is actually seen as a national resilience asset, first of all for the US and then for other governments around the world. So in the event of a category A biothreat outbreak, whether that's Marburg, Ebola, aerosolized Nipah, the US government doesn't just need a treatment, it needs a guaranteed therapeutic countermeasure for the people that actually hold the country together. And this slide actually highlights the strategic stockpile architecture we're building around galidesivir. It isn't theoretical, it's actually modeled directly on the continuity of government protocols and tiered response frameworks used by the US Department of Homeland Security. So very much validated in terms of who needs to be protected first when it comes to national emergencies. So tier 1 would include POTUS, the president, cabinet, congressional leadership, and the Supreme Court justices. There's about 300 individuals whose survival would be considered absolutely non-negotiable and paramount to the running of the US. Tier 2 kind of expands this out to the national security heads, FDA, CDC, HHS, and it's really the operational backbone of any crisis response that needs to actually be carried out. And then tiers 3 and 4 cover things like governors, emergency responders, and mission critical personnel, those people that keep the lights on, keep the water running, and try and prevent what would be a fairly significant panic if something devastating happened in the US. So in total, we're looking at a minimum of 10 to 20,000 treatment courses. Now, this is, as I said, this is a top single 0.1% of the population of the US. Obviously, most things that get stockpiled have far greater than that, but that's the absolute minimum number of treatment courses that will be required for high priority recipients. And just this number of courses represents over $100 million in value. And you'd think that every 2 years that would need to be replenished. So this isn't just a drug. It'll actually be a critical strategic asset for the running of the US in the event of emergency. And we're actually positioning galidesivir to be the first antiviral stockpiled for patient rescue under a Marburg outbreak. Now, whether that be natural, which is probably unlikely in the US, or intentional, which really is the whole reason behind the national stockpile in the first place. Next slide, David. So this slide is important for everyone to actually understand that the FDA's animal rule, it isn't theoretical or risky. It's a proven regulatory pathway that's actually already delivered 8 bioterror countermeasures into the national stockpile over the last sort of 10 or 12 years. And every product on this slide, from Emergent's monoclonal antibody to Seeger's TPOXX for smallpox. And for those that don't know, Seeger's a company you probably haven't even heard of, and yet its market cap is $1 billion. So it just goes to show that you don't have to hear about a company to know it's doing something great. And just compare that to what we have. And smallpox certainly isn't considered to be a significant threat when you look at Ebola and certainly look at Marburg. And these things were all approved onto this national stockpile without human efficacy trials, just safety only. So instead, the FDA and then the government relies on validated animal models. So just like galidesivir is doing now in Marburg infection, first off the rank, but certainly not the last. And the results of this, all products under the animal rule received US government funding and a national stockpile contract in amounts ranging from 100 million for a one-off anthrax vaccine to over $2 billion. And 7 out of the 8 actually continue to have a contract to supply the national stockpile, even though there are other countermeasures that go in and out. If you're on that stockpile, the government tends to keep you on that stockpile for various reasons. But the average lifetime value for product to date is $467.5 million per product. So anticipating a national stockpile contract after FDA approval actually is not a speculative stab in the dark. It's actually very, very well precedented. So, and of the 6 Category A bioterror threats that exist on the CDC's list of things that will destroy, human life, it's the 6 deadliest biological threats known to humans. There remains one single gap, and that's Marburg. The Marburg virus is the only Category A bio threat that's not currently addressed at all in the national stockpile. Now, that's very, very exciting news for us. And the US government, through its various agencies, have already spent $600 million trying to develop a Marburg countermeasure with no actual approved product to show for it all yet. And galidesivir is positioned to change all of that. So with the successful non-human primate data we already have, with one additional pivotal study and FDA alignment, galidesivir has the opportunity to become the first approved Marburg virus countermeasure under the animal rule. Now, that potentially unlocks a PRV worth around about 150 million US, potentially a multi-year national stockpile contract. And once you're on that contract, you have guaranteed procurement. They usually, in fact, in most cases, except for one, they offer a 5-year contract for your product. It's not just a one-off and then nothing else. You actually know what's going to happen over a 5-year period. And this really provides us non-dilutive revenue that's backed by a federal continuity mandate. So it'd be an expectation, both as an investor and as a chair of Ireland, that a significant amount of revenue that's generated through either a PRV, US government stockpile, or both actually will be returned to investors through a dividend. Certainly my hope at building shares over a 4-year period that there be some return, and for a small ASX company at this stage of its life to think that we might be, less than a year away from receiving a dividend, I think there's something pretty exciting about that, and I'm sure a lot of you would think the same. So, yeah, thank you, David. Back to you.
Yeah, Jason, thank you for that. That's fantastic. So with galidesivir, where have we been with this molecule? If we look at the right, we've talked about this for a while. We've done significant diligence on the molecule, looked at it every way imaginable, and we continue to be amazed at the opportunity it presents. We did close the transaction with BioCryst just a couple of months ago, and since then we've been working incredibly hard to identify people to be working with to move us into this next stage of development, where we're going to be doing non-human primate studies, an additional pivotal non-human primate study that we need to do. We're expecting to embark on that in very short order. Following that, a successful study, we will be working on our new drug application to get that submitted to the FDA. As Jason just mentioned, once we get approval, we should secure a priority review voucher that we would expect to sell. And then, of course, talking to folks to lay the groundwork to get into the strategic national stockpile. I'm not going to go through everything on the left to summarize the benefits of galidesivir. I think I've talked about this all quite a bit. But remarkable molecule. We have a very rapid timeline to move this thing along in what is turning out to be a really special opportunity, a special regulatory path that, as Jason pointed out, is not unprecedented. This has happened before, and there's a significant need in the stockpile for a Marburg countermeasure. So what do we expect coming up? Let's look at this completion of the galidesivir transaction. We've ticked that box, that's done. Submission of the documents and meeting requests to the FDA regarding galidesivir. So we've submitted the meeting request. That's already been taken care of a couple of weeks ago. We are working on the briefing document that will go to the FDA in support of the questions that we're asking to the FDA. We will get that filed in short order. We're working also with actually talking to a couple of different groups right now about where we will be conducting the non-human primate study. It has to be a special facility. It's a BSL-4 facility because we're working with Marburg nasty virus. So they're few and far between, but we've identified some excellent potential partners that are expressing interest in working with us. So we're happy with that. Next point here, receive feedback from the FDA regarding the meeting. That's what we received today. The FDA has responded to our meeting request. They agreed to the meeting request, which we were happy to see. And they've told us that they want to provide written responses to our questions, and we should receive those answers by around November 12th was the goal that the FDA set up. So from the company side of things, thrilled that we had the meeting request agreed to, and that we now have a date that we should expecting those answers. Soon after that, we'll initiate the Marburg NHP study with galidesivir, complete that study, and once that's done, we start talking about working on a new drug application and getting that submitted. Again, phenomenally exciting year coming up. There's going to be lots of events going on, lots of milestones to be achieved, moving quickly to what we hope is going to be an NDA submission and ultimately approval. So I think that's all that I have right here. I'm going to pause right here. I suspect we have some questions, but I want to thank Jason for taking time to come on. Thank you all for being here to listen to this story. And yeah, happy to hear what you have to say if there's any questions.
Thanks, David. We do have a number of questions that have come through. The first one, is the study design for the planned Marburg non-human primate trial, so for example, timing of treatment, dose, virus strain, method of drug delivery, drug formulation or challenge model, materially different from the first trial that was performed successfully? And also, is it possible to confirm the sample size for the planned study? Is it more than 12 animals per group?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great question, and it is exactly what we are working on right now in our briefing document to get in front of the FDA to ask the FDA what they expect out of this next animal study. So I don't know the answer today. I think when we get the answers around November 12th, I'll be able to answer what they want to see, as well as the number of animals in each of the cohorts. I don't know that yet either. So a little premature for me to say. I just don't know what the FDA is going to say, but we're as interested in that answer as you are. Yeah, great question.
And following receipt of the funds obtained from galidesivir, does Ireland intend to pursue dengue treatment or dengue prevention, or both, or neither?
Yeah. So what I like about that question is it assumes success with galidesivir and that we've gotten a priority review voucher and or a contract. So we like that a lot. And the answer to the question is we absolutely will be pursuing dengue. We'll be pursuing ISO 101 in dengue. Whether it's a prophylactic or as a treatment is a question that's still outstanding. We're working with our key opinion leaders, scientific advisors right now to nail down that protocol, but we absolutely will be moving forward with ISO 101 and dengue.
So, David, can directors see a possible scenario where, irrespective of interesting science, there are no commercially profitable opportunities to follow other than galidesivir?
No. So I'm going to speak for myself. I'm going to let Jason answer after I'm done. But no, actually, I don't see that. So one, with galidesivir, and I think we've, talked about it quite a bit, Marburg is just the tip of the iceberg with galidesivir. Once we get approved in Marburg, there's numerous viruses we can go after. We could pursue Ebola. We could pursue Zika, measles potentially. There's enormous opportunity with this molecule. But having said that, the answer still, we're going after ISO 101. So we think we have two bites at very significant apples with these molecules. Both of them will command significant revenue once approved. Dengue, again, there's 400 million cases of dengue every year. 100 million of those need some form of intervention. And there's nothing. The vaccines continue to be problematic. There's a tremendous need for a molecule like ISLA 101. So absolutely, we pursue both. Jason?
Yeah, I'd be absolutely brokenhearted if we didn't do anything with dengue. No, I mean, I invested in Ireland over 4 years from 2021 to 2025 based around dengue, and the animal models shown that control animals passed away. 1 dose per day was 30% survival. 2 doses was 70% survival. I hold on to that. We saw data that came through with the human volunteers that showed that the product's going to be effective. We are definitely going to move forward in dengue. I don't see any reason why we would not.
So I'd like to just turn to you, Jason, if I can. In your experience as an investor, what are the most important inflection points for Ireland in the next 6 months?
As an investor, okay. As an investor, there's probably one. First of all, as chair, I would say feedback from the FDA is going to be critical, and the Marburg study, which will be a pivotal study in animals, will also be inflection points. They'll be the 2 points that we know the model's been validated, we know what to do. As an investor, I look at the science behind the molecule, and I don't see the animal study as being obviously it's a non-starter if it doesn't work, but we've already seen how effective the drug is. Very, very unusual for that to happen by chance. In fact, I think it's about 1 in 100 million that's by chance. So the drug works. I think that the biggest thing obviously is making sure the FDA come back and provide us with some good guidance. And in 30 years of pharmaceuticals, I got to say the FDA's, you can't always guarantee exactly what they're going to say, but we actually are pretty confident with what we believe they're going to say. But there'll always be 1 or 2 curveballs, excuse me, that get thrown in there that you don't expect. But what I can honestly say is, regardless of how they come back, I know that we actually have the tools, we have the people to actually respond. And I don't think they'll come back with anything that we can't make sure that we can provide data for or back up for. That much I can say with great confidence. And for those people that know me, they know I don't say things out of turn. And I certainly don't promise things that I can't deliver and the team can't deliver. But there'll be nothing that will come back that we can't handle.
Thanks, Jason. Now, David, as we've mentioned quite extensively there, the company has been granted a meeting request by the FDA. What was the feedback from regulatory consultants in relation to this?
Yeah, so that notice came in about 5 hours ago. And we've had a circle of calls, talked to a bunch of people about that. One of the surprising things was it actually came back a little earlier than we expected, which I think was good. We were all very excited, one, that we received feedback when we did. We're very excited. I say we, it's David and the regulatory consultants that I spoke with. We're very excited that they accepted the meeting request. They didn't have to. And we're very excited that we have a date on the calendar when we're going to receive the information. One of the bits of information, because they're deciding to provide written responses to the questions, some people have said, you can probably infer that they didn't see anything in the questions that they thought was really controversial, that they needed to have a discussion with you about. So, take that however you want. I view that in an optimistic way. But again, to Jason's point, you can't always predict what they're going to do. So we'll wait until November 12th and see. But we keep everybody across it. But all in all, we're really pleased that the meeting request was granted and that we now have a date when we would expect the answers to those questions.
Yeah, and just on that, Alex, as well, I mean, everything that David said, absolutely correct. And there's nothing that we would expect that we put in that request that we don't believe that we don't know the answer to. So the fact that they came back and said, yes, we're happy to respond. Yes, we'll respond by this date. Meeting request accepted is actually a really good thing because it means that they are acting in the way that we expected they would, and they do in the majority of cases when it comes to next steps on drugs. So it's actually a really great thing.
So, David, can you just please shed light on the science behind why galidesivir is not effective against Marburg virus when administered after 1 hour, but effective 1 to 2 days after infection? Have you tested its effectiveness after 2 days of infection?
Why galidesivir is not effective after 1 hour of infection? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so it is. 5 out of 6 animals survived. Only one animal died. And again, I think that's an aberration in the data. You would expect dosing 1 hour after infection when the viral titer, the virus level in the animal is very, very low, that it should be more effective 1 hour after infection, which is why I think it's an aberration. The take home message from that slide really is at 24 and 48 hours, by this time, the animals have been incubating this lethal virus for 24 and 48 hours. There's substantially higher virus levels in the blood, yet the drug still works at 48 hours after infection. Phenomenal results. So I kind of think that 1 out of 6 that died, I think that's an aberration. It's in the data, so we have to address it. But the take home is at 24 and 48, you see 100% survival.
Yeah, it's what's commonly called an outlier. So
Yeah,
that's certainly the case. And they say don't work with children and small animals. So it's one of those things. But no, that wouldn't have anything to do with the drug. But as I say, it happened. But at 24 and 48 hours, every animal survived. So that's certainly what you would expect. And this is what happens when you put 20 animals into a study. You don't always get to decide. When they come in, there's no entry criteria apart from are they an NHP. So it happens in science and it happens in trials.
Now, David, are there any other companies that you know of focused on the development of Marburg and Ebola treatments?
yeah, that's a good question. So we know that with respect to Ebola, I'll start there first. There's approved vaccines for Ebola. There are some approved treatments for Ebola, molecules that are actually in the strategic national stockpile that Jason was talking about and that we've been discussing. The drugs that are approved for Ebola are, interestingly, including the vaccine, they're approved for only one strain of Ebola. They're monoclonal antibodies. They're being used, but they're not being used a lot. But they're out there. With respect to Marburg, again, there's no vaccine, there's no available treatment, there's nothing that you can do for Marburg. We're aware of other companies looking at Marburg Therapeutics. Some people are taking the same antibody approach that was used to develop these antibodies for Ebola. They're trying to do the same thing. I can say with confidence, I don't think anybody is as close to an NDA as we are and we will be. So yeah, other people are looking, but I don't think anybody else is as close as we are.
Thanks, David. And just finally, why did BioCryst let galidesivir go?
Yeah, so again, this is one of those I'll start and I'm going to let Jason wrap up this question. BioCryst is, as you know, and as I mentioned, was developing galidesivir. They had received around $70 million from the US government and were driving forward doing studies in Marburg. And then they had an outbreak in Ebola, so they shifted to Ebola. And then COVID happened. And when COVID happened, the US government really pulled the funds from BioCryst and they weren't able to advance the program. BioCryst made a decision and said, we're not going to spend any of our own money on this program. We are going to instead pivot. We are a rare disease company, which is what BioCryst is. And so during the midst of COVID in 2019, 2020, this became an asset that was sitting on the shelf that had no internal support, had no money, and the US government wasn't paying for it anymore. It was off strategy. So it was just one of those that sort of fell by the wayside, and without an internal champion, I don't think anybody was there to carry the torch. For us, when we were doing our diligence, we looked at it and said, maybe not everybody wants that molecule, but it fits our strategy perfectly because we want to focus on these type of antiviral molecules. We want to focus on these strategic national stockpile and priority review voucher strategies. That's really what we do. So again, we reached out to them after lots of discussion. We structured what I think is a really fair deal with them. It is low up front, but they also have the opportunity to be quite successful when we're successful with royalties that are actually pretty nice, and then a percent of the proceeds from a priority review voucher. It's not bad for a molecule that they've never spent any of their own money on. So I think it's a good deal for both sides, but that's what I think happened. I think they lost the champion, they lost the funding, and it was off strategy. Jason?
Yeah, it happens in the industry all the time. Thanks, David. I mean, there's a change in direction. Either a new CEO comes in, someone leaves, the key person in the program leaves, you put it on the shelf, and all your staff get redirected to other priorities. You just never come back to it. And I've seen it happen in multiple times for whole therapeutic areas within J&J and other companies. You just essentially put it off to the side and no one ever comes back to it. I'd also sort of hazard a guess that the national stockpile maybe is something that wasn't considered in great depth. And obviously with the number of opportunities there actually are for this product, maybe it wasn't something that was considered. Sometimes you don't value as much when someone else gives you the funds to do everything as well. So it was probably not in the strategic best interest of the company at whatever time they did have it and put it on the shelf and decided not to spend their own money on it. But it simply happens. And I guess that, sometimes you drop the ball in front of goal, and that happens. And another company, another person picks it up and kicks the goal. So in this case, we have a really good opportunity here to get what I would suggest is probably one of the best assets right now going around anywhere in almost any company. It's essentially a pipeline and a company in its own right as an asset, and the value that can be generated from this asset is significant. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, not just from a PRV, but from an ongoing contract, and that's just for one indication. So the opportunity there for us is huge, and I'm very, very thankful, David, that you're the one that reached out to the CEO of BioCryst, and they came to the party, and I think that's going to be very, very significant for every investor within Ireland. So it's going to be a very exciting year ahead, and obviously with multiple indications and a lot of runway, I think we're going to do very, very well as a business and for our investors. So thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Look, that's all the time we have today. Thank you all for joining me, and I'd also like to thank David and Jason for presenting and taking the time to answer some questions. As I mentioned before, a recording of the webinar will be on Ireland's social media platforms later today. David, before I let you go, do you have any final comments to leave with us today?
Oh, Alex, thank you. Jason, thank you for being here. And thank you all for coming along for the ride. It's been an exciting year for us, and we are just beginning what is going to be a phenomenal next 6 to 12 months. So yeah, thanks everyone. And I look forward to coming along, together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining. I think we have a wonderful set of assets within this company and a great team to lead it. I think you can have confidence in this group to know that we will be able to deliver for you. But have a great day. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Fantastic. That wraps it up for us here. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.